Hi everybody, my name is Meredith Arensmeier and I'm your child's geometry teacher this year. I wanted to start this video off by giving you a face to a name so you have an idea of who it is your child is talking about if they ever come home talking about math. This video is going to mostly be us going through the slides. I go through every back to school night to give you an idea of what your child will be experiencing in my class, so we'll get started right now. So like I said, I'm Mrs. Arensmeier. Your child might call me Mrs. Arens, kind of the shortened version, or they might call me Miss McCann if they knew me from previous years. That's my maiden name. I hope you find this presentation helpful and informative. If you have any questions today, tomorrow, next week, anytime throughout the year, please know you can always email me and I'd be happy to help. I'm so excited for this year. I love geometry and I can't wait to get to know your students even better and to get them as excited about geometry as I am. Geometry was actually the math topic that made me decide I officially wanted to be a math teacher, so it's something I'm really passionate about, and I really try to bring that to the students. Try to do a lot of exploration and hands-on learning so that they can also see how cool and exciting geometry can be. But we're here to just kind of get to know the basics. Most of the information is on that handout you might have picked up at Back to School Night, but this video goes over that in even more detail. So the first thing I want to talk about is the way that I grade my assessments. It's a little bit different than the way traditional grading is done. It doesn't affect their actual score of their grade in any way. It just provides a little bit more clarity for you and your students on where their strengths and weaknesses are. So if a student takes a quiz and it covers 3 different skills, you'll find 3 different grades in Skyward for that quiz. It averages out the same way, but it gives you a lot more information. So if you look at the bottom of this slide, you'll see a traditional grade method where it says Mike Smith got a 13 out of 20 on quiz Unit 1 quiz. Now, that doesn't really tell us a whole lot about what Mike knows other than that he didn't do that well, right? But in the way that I grade, what Mike would be able to see is that on the symmetry portion of the assessment, he got 2 out of the 3 available points. For proportion solving, he only got 3 out of the 7 available points, and for equation solving, he got 8 out of the 10 available points. When you see it written out this way, it gives a lot more clarity that there's a really big issue when it comes to proportion solving for the most part, right? It gives an understanding that that's somewhere he really needs to spend a lot more time focusing on. Whereas generally the equation solving skills and the symmetry skills, he at least is getting the majority of the questions right. Now, something I do want to just let you know of, it does not affect the overall score, but what sometimes it takes a little bit of an adjustment is seeing symmetry out of 2 out of 3 points. When it goes into Skyward, it comes up with the letter grade associated with a 66. Now, that doesn't mean it gets averaged in, but sometimes that kind of freaks some kids out. And so I will now talk about how they can change that, how they can improve their scores if they want to, but also to let you know that sometimes if you see, let's say, a 75, well, before you go and get really concerned about your students' understanding, open up and see if that is a 75 that's a 3 out of 4 or it's a 15 out of 20, right? Because there's a big difference between getting 1 point off versus getting 5 points off an assignment. So just go and do a little bit more digging so you can better understand what that number actually represents, so you can see how much of the assessment is really impacted by that grade. But overall, anytime that you are unhappy, your child is unhappy with how they performed on an assessment, I do allow for retakes in my class. There's only 1 test throughout the year that doesn't have a retake. We give a midterm district-wide. All 8th grade students take a geometry midterm. So that one we don't do retakes on, but with the exception of the midterm, every other test or quiz I give all year, students can do a retake. And I will accept the higher of the 2 grades. You don't need to have a minimum grade to be allowed to do a retake. If you got a 95 and want to try for a 100, that's totally your call and up to you. And if you wanted to go from a 75 up higher, once again, it's totally your call. Now, something that I want you to understand about that is that you must do a extra help session in order to be eligible for the retake. So when I give a test back, I will give the retake date. I will tell students when I'm available for extra help, and it's up to them to take advantage of those extra help sessions to be eligible for the retake. Retakes occasionally happen during class, and a lot of times they'll happen during homeroom. So during the school day is when they will happen, but sometimes it'll happen during class time, while other times it'll happen during homeroom. I will always take the higher of the two grades to be averaged into the final grade for the marking period. The lower of the two grades will be recorded in the comments section so they can either see how much they've improved or perhaps they can see if the retake didn't go as well as they had hoped. And something that's good to know about the way I grade, going back to skills-based grading, some students might only want to retake certain parts of a test. So let's take Mike Smith again for an example. Perhaps that equation solving 8 out of 10, he feels really good about that and he really wants to focus his energy on proportion solving. Well, then he can just retake the portion of the test that was about proportions. Or he can retake just symmetry and proportions and not take equation solving, or he could take all three. It would be entirely up to him, and that's a conversation that you and your child can have. If there's ever a test that gets returned that you're not happy with, you can really help make a plan. I like to give students the decision of what they feel comfortable with and what they don't. Some students feel really comfortable when they get, an 8 out of 10. That's a really great grade for them. And to other students, they want to be able to improve. So it's entirely up to them what they want to do. Like I said, the only thing that needs to be done is they need to attend one extra help session. Now, it's one extra help session whether they're retaking one part or they're retaking multiple parts. It's not per part they're retaking, just one extra help session will cover all of the bases. And the other thing that I'm sure you probably have questions about, you have 8th graders going into 9th grade next year. I'm sure I know a lot of you have. This is not your first child, so you kind of know what's going on when it comes to high school recommendations, and others it might be your first child going to high school. Something good to know is that the math department has rearranged the math curriculum in the past couple years. We used to go Algebra 1, then Geometry, then Algebra 2, and it's been restructured to do Geometry in 8th grade and then Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 done consecutively at the 9th and 10th grade respectively. So we are going to be recommending all of our students for Algebra 1 next year. The question is, which Algebra 1 course will they be recommended into? So there's 3 different versions of Algebra 1 offered at the high school. There's Algebra 1, Algebra 1 CP, and Advanced Algebra 1. Now, all of these classes are going to cover the basics of algebra, but others are going to dive deeper, go at a faster pace, be a more challenging class, or perhaps a slightly slower moving pace, one that has a smaller class size to accommodate a student that needs that. The point of the recommendation is not a reward or punishment system. It's entirely a system set up to help us decide where our students would be most successful based on previous indicators. So the indicators we use are a large amount of what they've done in the first 2 marking periods in 8th grade. The recommendations are made at the end of the 2nd quarter. So we'll use test and quiz grades and the midterm from 8th grade, as well as some ungraded check-ins that we might be giving throughout the year. We'll make sure they still know their understanding of fractions and decimals and percents. And then we'll also look back at some 7th grade test scores because since it is an algebra class and geometry and algebra can be very different, it's important to see that their pre-algebra skills are strong in terms of it going into an advanced class, for example. Now, students need to be recommended into these advanced classes, but if they are and don't feel like that's a placement they're comfortable with, you can always go down into a level below, but you do need to be recommended into a class above where you are originally recommended to. So that's just a little bit to understand about the high school recommendation process. It'll be a lot more clear as we move along into the rest of the year, and your students will be getting more information from guidance counselors, teachers from the high school, and us as well as we get closer to that time. Now, homework and extra help. I want to just talk about homework first because that's something that I know can provide a lot of stress and anxiety for students. I don't provide a lot of homework, but when I do think it is really meant to help your students learn, to take advantage of some time for them to sit and try to do things independently. I don't take points off for late homework as long as it's submitted by the end of the unit that assignment is related to. So up until the day of the test, as long as they submit it, I will accept it for credit. With that said, I am still expecting that students are completing work in a timely manner, but I don't want to penalize them from a grade as long as they're getting the practice that's associated with the assessment. I'm not going to take points off from their grade book. But what I do want you to understand as a parent is I don't want math homework to cause tears. I don't want math homework to cause growing frustration, because then the whole point of math homework being there to help your student learn, that goal is not being accomplished. If you find your student is not having success with their homework, they're getting to those points of major frustration, please have them send me an email. We'll find a time to work it out. Like I said, it's not going to affect their grade if it's incomplete. If they try to do homework incorrectly, they might actually get themselves more confused. So in the event that that's happening, please have them reach out to me and I'll be happy to work with them. And when can I work with your students? I love to provide extra help for students, especially students that are really seeking it out themselves. I think that that's a really good skill to have. I'm available for homeroom almost every day. Only times I wouldn't be available is if there's something the school is having us do during homeroom. For example, if students are doing something for student council, I might not be able to offer it then, but otherwise I'll be available for extra help every day during homeroom. And then after school, I'm available Monday through Thursday unless I have a meeting. I've told students that sometimes Mondays are my big meeting days, so a lot of times I'm not going to be there on those days. And I don't have Friday, but if there's a test on a Monday, for example, I will be available on Friday. If your students know that they need extra help and they know they're going to be stopping by after school, great, let them give me a heads up so I can make sure I'm in my room, not running to make copies or something like that at the end of the day. But they can always just stop by, and if I'm in my room, I'm happy to give them extra help as well. So thank you so much for coming to watch this video and learn more about what your student is experiencing in my class. Like I said, you can always email me if you have any questions, and I really hope we all have a really great and successful year. Thanks so much.